Here's something quietly eating away at men, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a slow, invisible, and devastating one. People often talk about how pornography is ruining men, how it's affecting relationships, intimacy, and even motivation. But if Carl Jung were alive today, he'd likely say, "You're looking at the symptom, not the disease." Because what truly destroys men faster than pornography is the loss of self, a man's disconnection from his own soul. From a young age, men are taught to suppress their emotions, to toughen up, to hide their fears and pain. They're told to be strong, silent, and successful. And in the process, they begin to wear a mask. Jung called this the persona, the version of ourselves we show the world to gain approval or avoid rejection. It's not fake, but it's not fully real either. Over time, many men begin to believe this mask is who they are. They become the provider, the achiever, the fixer. But deep down, there's a growing emptiness. Why? Because the parts of them that feel deeply, create, love freely, and cry in silence have been buried, and that inner exile is what leads to collapse. Jung warned that the more we reject our true selves, the more we invite suffering. When a man hides his emotions, when he denies his wounds, when he numbs his pain with distractions, be it work, power, or yes, pornography, he doesn't heal. He just disconnects further. The wound festers in the shadow, the dark, unconscious part of the psyche where everything we avoid gets locked away. The shadow doesn't stay quiet forever. Eventually it leaks out in the form of depression, addiction, rage, or deep spiritual numbness. This is what Jung feared most, not immorality, but inauthenticity. Porn may numb men, but what truly destroys them is this internal silence, the lack of connection to anything real, raw, or meaningful. Men turn to fantasy not just for pleasure, but to escape the unbearable weight of feeling empty inside. That emptiness doesn't come from a lack of sex or stimulation. It comes from a lack of soul connection. A man who has never met his shadow, never embraced his vulnerability, and never accepted his emotional truth becomes a shell, functional on the outside but spiritually hollow within. And here's something few are brave enough to say: society rewards men for this spiritual self-abandonment. The more emotionally shut down a man is, the more he's praised for being strong. The more he sacrifices his inner world for outer achievement, the more he's seen as successful. But this is a trap. Because eventually, something inside him breaks. He may look fine on paper, but he's lost the most important thing a person can have: wholeness. Jung didn't want men to be perfect. He wanted them to be whole. That means embracing both the light and the dark, the joy and the grief, the masculine and the feminine. Every man carries an inner feminine energy, what Jung called the anima, which holds his capacity to feel, nurture, imagine, and love deeply. When men reject this part of themselves, they chase it in fantasy or relationships, never realizing what they're truly seeking is something inside of them. So what destroys men faster than pornography? It's not lust. It's not addiction. It's living a life that isn't yours. It's pretending every day. It's silencing your truth. It's wearing a mask so long you forget who you are without it. The way forward isn't shame. It's honesty. It's asking hard questions like, who am I really? What am I hiding from? What do I feel but never allow myself to say? Healing starts when a man dares to be real, not performative, not perfect, but real. Because nothing heals a man faster than finding his way back to himself. Pornography often gets blamed for destroying men, but Carl Jung would say the deeper issue is something more silent and invisible: the loss of the authentic self. From a young age, men are taught to hide their emotions, to be strong, and to fit into society's expectations. Over time, they wear a mask, what Jung called the persona, to get approval, success, or respect. But the more they wear that mask, the more disconnected they become from who they truly are. This disconnection leads to a quiet kind of suffering. A man may look fine on the outside but feel hollow inside. That emptiness is what drives many toward addiction, not just porn, but anything that numbs or distracts. The real pain isn't about lust, it's about losing touch with one's soul. Jung believed healing starts when a man dares to face himself honestly. When he removes the mask, feels what he's buried, and reclaims his own truth. Because a man who remembers who he really is, beyond roles, beyond pressure, is far harder to destroy. Porn may distract, but self-abandonment is what truly breaks a man from within. Building on the loss of the authentic self, Jung warned that the biggest trap men fall into is becoming their persona, the mask they wear to survive in the world. This mask isn't evil, it helps us function. But the danger is when men begin to believe the mask is who they are. The strong provider, the stoic leader, the high achiever. These roles can slowly replace the real person underneath. And over time, the man inside becomes silent, almost forgotten. Living through the persona feels safe, even praised. Society rewards men for being emotionally distant, for having it all together. But this constant performance comes at a cost. It disconnects men from their feelings, their needs, and their purpose. They may be productive, but they feel empty. They may be respected, but they feel unknown. Jung believed this inner split, the false self on the outside and the buried self within, creates immense suffering. The man becomes two people, the one the world sees, and the one he secretly is. True healing begins when he peels back the mask, not to throw it away, but to remember who's underneath it. Without that awareness, the mask becomes a prison. Once a man becomes trapped in his persona, the next step is usually emotional repression. To keep the mask in place, he has to silence anything that doesn't fit it: fear, sadness, tenderness, even joy. He pushes these feelings down because he's been taught that showing them makes him weak, or less of a man. Over time, this constant suppression doesn't make him stronger, it makes him numb. And in that numbness, he starts to vanish from himself. Carl Jung warned that whatever we repress doesn't disappear, it moves into the shadow, the unconscious part of our psyche. Those buried emotions don't stay quiet. They show up in unexpected ways: anger outbursts, addictions, depression, or a general feeling of emptiness. A man might seem calm, but he's emotionally starved. He may be praised for being unshakable, but inside, he's lost all feeling. This emotional shutdown creates a kind of ghost, a man who functions, but no longer truly lives. He avoids pain, but also misses joy. He doesn't feel broken, because he doesn't feel much at all. Jung's message here is clear: a man must reclaim his emotional life, or be slowly destroyed by the silence he's been forced to live in. As a man represses more of his true emotions to maintain the persona, everything he hides, his anger, sadness, insecurities, and fears, collects in what Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow is the dark, unacknowledged side of the self. It's not evil, it's human. But the more a man avoids it, the more dangerous it becomes. Because what you refuse to face doesn't disappear. It controls you from behind the scenes. When a man lives disconnected from his inner truth, the shadow starts making choices for him. He lashes out without knowing why. He ruins relationships, sabotages his goals, or sinks into habits that numb the pain. Porn might be one escape, but the real issue is the inner chaos, emotions and truths that were never given space to exist. Jung warned that if you don't make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you'll call it fate. In other words, men who never face their shadow blame the world for the damage caused by their own inner denial. Healing means turning toward that shadow, not to fear it, but to understand it. Because facing the shadow is the only way to reclaim power over your life. By the time a man is living from his persona, repressing emotions, and avoiding his shadow, it's no surprise that he turns to pornography or other compulsive behaviors. But Carl Jung would be the first to point out, porn is not the disease. It's a symptom. It's a quick fix to avoid facing deeper emotional wounds. When a man feels disconnected, numb, or hollow inside, porn offers a temporary escape, a false sense of intimacy or control. But it doesn't heal the root cause. It only deepens the divide. A man struggling with porn is usually a man who is starving emotionally. He's craving connection, meaning, and self-understanding, but doesn't know how to find it. And so, he turns to the easiest outlet. The problem isn't the desire, it's the disconnection beneath the desire. Without knowing who he really is, or what he truly needs, he gets stuck in cycles that keep him numb. Jung would say, don't just fight the behavior, explore what's underneath it. Ask, what am I trying not to feel? What part of me have I abandoned? The answer is never just about porn. It's about the self that's been lost along the way. Carl Jung believed that every man carries within him a hidden force called the anima, the inner feminine side of the psyche. This isn't about gender or sexuality, it's about emotional balance. The anima holds a man's ability to feel deeply, to create, to nurture, to love fully, and to connect with intuition. But in many cultures, men are taught to reject anything, soft, or emotional, as weakness. And so, the anima gets buried, ignored, denied, and repressed. When this happens, men lose access to a vital part of themselves. They may feel emotionally flat or disconnected from others. Often, they begin projecting their anima onto women, seeking in romantic partners or in pornography the emotional connection they've cut off inside themselves. But no fantasy or external relationship can replace what's missing internally. Jung warned that a man who fails to embrace his anima remains emotionally immature and fragmented. He may look powerful on the outside, but he's only living with half of his soul. True strength isn't found in rejecting emotion, it's found in balancing it. When a man accepts his full emotional nature, he becomes not weaker, but more whole, capable of love, empathy, and deep connection. After facing the shadow, reclaiming the authentic self, and embracing the anima, Carl Jung's message becomes clear. Healing isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. Many men chase ideals of success, dominance, or fixing themselves. But this constant striving only deepens their wounds. Perfection is just another mask, another way to avoid what's real. Wholeness, on the other hand, is about integrating all parts of the self, the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine, the broken and the brave. Jung taught that the journey of individuation, the process of becoming your true self, begins when a man stops running from his inner world. He no longer sees his flaws as failures but as invitations to grow. He doesn't numb his pain, he learns from it. He doesn't suppress his emotions, he listens to them. This is the deeper truth. What destroys men faster than pornography is the denial of their own inner lives. It's the refusal to feel, to face, to grow. Healing isn't found in external fixes. It's found in radical inner honesty. When a man chooses wholeness over perfection, he steps into true power. And in that space, he becomes far harder to break. Carl Jung did not speak in exaggerations or empty warnings. His ideas were rooted in a deep understanding of the human psyche. When he explored the forces that distort and destroy men, he didn't point to surface-level addictions, but to the psychic fragmentation behind them. Pornography may dull the senses, but what destroys men faster is the loss of self, a slow death caused by repressing emotions, ignoring the shadow, denying the anima, and living behind the mask of a persona. Jung taught that every human being is called to a journey of individuation, a process where the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche are brought into balance. For men, this means moving beyond the cultural scripts of toughness, suppression, and emotional detachment. It means facing the fear, the sorrow, the shame, and integrating these truths, not burying them. True healing doesn't arrive by avoiding darkness, but by confronting it with courage. A man who dares to meet his shadow becomes a man who can finally stand in his light. The goal is not to be flawless, it is to be whole. And in Jung's words, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. This is the path. Not escape. Not perfection. But integration. If there is one truth that echoes through Carl Jung's teachings, it's this: healing doesn't begin when we fix ourselves, it begins when we face ourselves. The modern man isn't necessarily broken by his addictions, failures, or even his pain. He is broken by the belief that he must wear a mask to be loved, suppress his emotions to be strong, and disconnect from his soul to be successful. What destroys men faster than pornography, faster than failure, faster even than trauma, is this slow erosion of self, this quiet exile from who they truly are. And the tragedy is that most men don't even realize it's happening until they wake up one day numb, empty, or afraid to be alone with their own thoughts. Jung believed the soul doesn't disappear, it retreats. It waits. The parts of a man that were cast off, his gentleness, his vulnerability, his grief, his dreams, don't die, they go underground. Into the shadow. They become buried beneath years of conditioning, social armor, and silent suffering. And yet, beneath every addiction, every emotional shutdown, every compulsive habit, there is always a deeper story waiting to be heard. It is the story of the abandoned self. And in Jung's eyes, the greatest task of a man's life is to retrieve that self, not to discard the persona, but to integrate it with the deeper truths hiding beneath. That process is not easy. It requires an act of radical courage. It demands that a man look into the mirror without flinching, not to assess his status or achievements, but to ask, who am I really? What am I running from? What have I buried that's still alive within me, asking to be seen? The man who is willing to ask these questions, not just once, but daily, is already on the path to individuation, the path to becoming whole. Because wholeness, as Jung reminded us, is not the same as perfection. It is not about removing the flaws, the wounds, or the pain. It is about welcoming them into the story, honoring them, and discovering the gold that was hidden in the shadow all along. Men today are starving for this kind of inner work. Not just to feel better, but to become real again. Real in their relationships. Real in their emotional world. Real in their sense of purpose. The outer world is loud with distractions, success metrics, sexual images, status games, surface-level rewards, but the inner world waits in stillness. A man can spend his life climbing ladders, chasing pleasure, building empires, yet feel deeply unknown, even to himself. Jung would say that this feeling of emptiness is not a failure, it is a signal. It is the soul calling him back home. That call often comes disguised as burnout, depression, addiction, or restlessness. But beneath each symptom is a sacred invitation to stop pretending, to stop performing, and to begin remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. This remembering is not regression. It is resurrection. It is the painful yet profound act of reclaiming your inner child, your emotional true. Let this be the invitation, not to shame, but to wholeness. Not to self-improvement, but to self-remembering. Start small. Ask yourself one honest question a day. Let yourself feel something real. Speak a truth you buried. Reclaim the parts of you that were once silenced. This isn't weakness, it's strength. This isn't indulgence, it's healing. And the world doesn't need more perfect men. It needs more whole men. Men who are fully alive, emotionally awake, and unafraid to walk the long road home to themselves. Because in the end, the greatest gift a man can give the world is not his resume, not his status, not even his success. It is his authentic presence. It is his courage to live with an open heart. And it is his willingness to become who he truly is, behind every mask, beneath every wound, fully, finally, and without apology. That is the real revolution. And it begins from within. So if you've made it this far, I want to say this, thank you. Not just for watching, but for listening. For sitting with something deeper than noise, deeper than blame, deeper than the surface. Because this isn't just about porn. Or addiction. Or even psychology. This is about coming home to yourself. If you're a man who's felt numb, disconnected, or like you're living behind a mask, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're just overdue to meet the parts of yourself you've been taught to ignore. And that work, reclaiming your soul, is the bravest thing you'll ever do. Don't rush it. Don't fix it. Just start by being honest. Ask yourself, what part of me have I abandoned? What truth have I buried just to survive? Because healing doesn't start with becoming someone new. It starts with remembering who you were before the world told you to hide. If this message spoke to something in you, let it. And share it with someone who needs to hear it too. Subscribe if you want more conversations like this. Real ones, not performative ones. And most of all, stay connected to your truth. Because the world doesn't need more perfect men. It needs more whole ones. Fade out with gentle instrumental music. Screen shows. Subscribe, watch next, comment below.